Welcome to the 16th chapter of the book of 2 Kings. This chapter is about Ahaz, king of Judah. Most of the reign of Ahaz, king of Judah, was during the prophecy of Isaiah, and we will go through that when we get into it. But it begins in the 17th year of Pekah, son of Romoliah, Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, or Ahaz in Greek, son of Jotham, king of Judah, reigned. Ahaz was his son being 20 years old in his reigning, and 16 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And he did not do the upright thing in the eyes of the Lord his God. As David, his forefather, as I mentioned, I add the four because he's not his true father, his forefather. They don't have a word for that in Greek. And he went in the way of the kings of Israel, and indeed, he led his son through fire according to the abominations of the nations which the Lord removed in front of the sons of Israel. And that would have been to Moloch. They set up a monument to Moloch in the valley of the sons of Hinnom, in the southern area of the outside of the gate and wall of Jerusalem, where they burned trash and so forth. Apparently set up this abomination, some type of a furnace that they burned their children in sacrifice. Pretty gory. And he sacrificed and burned incense in the high places and upon the hills and underneath every tree of the woods, just as the other kings did also, these idolatrous rites in the high places, and were generally probably where there was hilly area and underneath the trees. Then Rason, king of Syria, ascended, and Pekah, son of Romaliah, king of Israel, to Jerusalem for war. And Rezin was from Damascus, Syrian. And they made an assault against Ahaz and were not able to wage war successfully. Well, they weren't able to wage war successfully as far as capturing Jerusalem, but they did capture many of the Judites and took them up into Samaria. But the prophet Oded told the rulers of Samaria that they were not to do this, and so they clothed all the captives, put sandals on their feet, and sent them back to Judah down south. And in that time, Rezin, king of Assyria, returned. Elath to Syria. Well, Elath was down in near the Red Sea, seacoast town, and somehow Assyria acquired it, and it cast out the Jews from out of Elath. And now Idumeans would be better here than Edomites. The Idumeans were from Edom, and they came into Elath, which they were right next to it, actually, probably part of their kingdom. Today it would be in the country of Jordan. And they dwelt there until this day, until whenever this book was written. And Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of the Assyrians, would be Tiglath-Pileser III, saying, I am your bondman and your son. Ascend and deliver me from the hand of the king of Syria, and from out of the hand of the king of Israel, of the ones rising up against me. Now, Nineveh was the capital of the Assyrian nation, and it was between the Tigris and Euphrates River, Mesopotamia. And Nineveh was up far north, and Jonah was a prophet also during this period of time who went to tell Nineveh to repent. So Ahaz took the silver and the gold he found in the treasuries, Thesavris. We have Thesaurus comes from that, a treasury of words. It's a book in English. Took the treasuries of the house of the Lord and of the house of the king, and sent gifts to the king of the Assyrians, Tiglath-Pileser. And the king of the Assyrians, this should be hearkened to him, went along with his plan. And the king of the Assyrians ascended up against Damascus and seized it and resettled it. So he takes the people from Syria, Damascus, and then he moves them someplace else, another place that he captured, and mixes the people all up so that they won't have a problem with nationalism and so forth, and coming and starting to revolt against the Assyrians. And he killed Rezin, the king. And King Ahaz went to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of the Assyrians, in Damascus, and saw the altar in Damascus. Now, before we go too far, when the Rezin and the king of Israel attacked, there was an interesting place in here in Isaiah 7. It goes in, and you can read a lot of this. And it came to pass in the days of Ahaz, son of Jotham, and goes on down, that they came against Jerusalem, and it was announced and so forth. And you can go all the way down and read this as I'm going through it here. But the interesting part comes over here in 7:10, where it says, "And the Lord proceeded to speak to Ahaz." So this was before I believe, before he went to Tiglath-Pileser. And he was saying, "Ask to yourself, or for yourself, a sign by the Lord your God, in the depth or in the height," anything. And Ahaz said, "In no way shall I ask, nor shall I test the Lord," to Elijah probably. And he said, God, I believe is he, "Hear our Isaiah, hear indeed, O house of Israel. Is it a small thing to you to furnish a struggle to men? Then how do you furnish a struggle to God, to the Lord? How are you going against him? On account of this, the Lord himself will give to you a sign." Here's the famous quotation, and we find out it's down here. It's in Matthew 1:23. And it is, "Behold," in their third edition, which this is of, has the curlicues marking off the quotations. "Behold, the virgin," not a woman, not a young girl, but a Parthenos, where we get the word Parthenon, which was a temple in Athens for the virgin. "She will conceive in the womb, and she shall bear a son, and you shall call his name Emmanuel," or God with us. "Butter and honey he shall eat before he knows to prefer wicked or to choose the good." And you can go on through here. I'll just scroll down and you can see it and read it. Now going back, and now after that, then as Ahaz has hired the Tiglath-Pileser to come against Damascus, which he does, because he's so successful that King Ahaz went to meet Tiglath-Pileser, king of the Assyrians, in Damascus. And he saw the altar, the one that was for the Assyrians in Damascus. And King Ahaz sent to Uriah the priest, the likeness of the altar and the proportions of it, according to all its makings. And Uriah the priest built the altar according to all as much as King Ahaz sent from out of Damascus. Thus Uriah the king did until the coming of the king from out of Damascus. So he builds this giant altar with the replica of the one in Damascus. And the king Ahaz came from out of Damascus, and the king beheld the altar, and the king drew near to the altar and ascended unto it. And he offered his whole burnt offering and his sacrifice offering, and offered a libation of his libation offering on it. and he poured upon it blood of his peace offering upon the altar. So now all these sacrifices are null and void because it's not done on the true altar. And the brass altar, which was before the Lord, he brought forward in front of the house of the Lord from between the altar and from between the house of the Lord, and put it by the side of the altar according to the north. So here we have the altar and Holy of Holies. Holy of Holies, and the altar was outside of the gate. And so he moves it up to the north and puts his new altar where the other one was. And King Ahaz gave charge to Urijah the priest, saying, upon the great altar offer the whole burnt offering, the early morning offering, and the evening sacrifice offering, and the whole burnt offerings of the king, and his sacrifice offerings, and the whole burnt offering of all the people, and their sacrifice offerings, and their libation offerings, everything to be different. And all the blood of the whole burnt offering, and all the blood of the sacrifice offering, you shall pour out upon it. Now, so this was again a null and void, avoided the sacrifices of the true altar. And the altar of brass will be to me in the morning. Now, exactly which altar, I think probably the true altar, but he's going to do something different for himself instead of the priesthood. And Urijah the priest did according to all as much as Ahaz the king gave charge to him. They also locked all the doors of the temple. People couldn't get into the area to do obeisance, and also other places. I think it mentions, this is all being mentioned also in 2 Chronicles. I forgot, I want to think chapter 14. And King Ahaz cut down the joinery of the bases and moved the bathing tubs from them. So these bases were oxen, as we'll see here. And he demolished, changes it all over, and the sea, that would be the bathing tub, he lowered from the oxen of Halcon, brass. We have the Chalcolithic era, the Bronze Age, comes from that word, brass, Halcon. The ones underneath it, and put it upon a stone base, another change. And the foundation of the chair of the Sabbath he built in the house of the Lord. Now, whatever this is, I'm not sure, because I don't believe this was in the law of Moses to build anything like that. And a word here is cathedros. We have a word of a cathedral. And a cathedral generally is a giant church in the Roman Catholic religion, where they put a chair for the Pope. And then they called this a cathedral because of a chair. And he built it in the house of the Lord. And the entrance of the king outside, he turned in the house of the Lord from in front of the king of the Assyrians. And the rest of the words of Ahaz, as much as he did, behold, are not these written upon the scrolls of the words of the days of the kings of Judah? And Ahaz slept with his fathers, and he was entombed with his fathers in the city of David. But Chronicle says he wasn't buried in there, in the tombs of the kings. And Hezekiah, his son, reigned instead of him. And Hezekiah was a good king who changed around all the things, reversed all the things that his father Ahaz did. But we'll find out about Hezekiah in chapter 18. The next chapter is on Hoshea, king of Israel, the last king. So I hope you'll join us and find out what happens to Israel. Till then, God bless.